Hello everyone, it is Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. We're back here with another edition of Budget Magic. This time we are heading to Standard to play Mardu Aristocrats. So, if you're not familiar with Aristocrats, there was a deck a couple of years ago that Tom Martell used to win a Pro Tour. Was built by Team Star City Games when that was still a thing. And it was a black-red-white, so a Mardu-colored sacrifice deck that was called the Aristocrats because it was based around Falkenrath Aristocrat and Cartel Aristocrat. This deck, obviously, we don't have any actual Aristocrats since they have long since rotated, but the idea is to build a similar deck with the pieces we have in Standard. As you can see, the price is $60 online, $93 in paper. You can actually make this even cheaper if you need to. The cutoff for the series we kind of came up with, our tentative or cutoff, was $100 in paper prices. So I built this deck from scratch. Unlike some budget Magic decks where I find a list and turn it into a budget deck, or it's already a budget deck and I just play it, this one, completely from scratch. I put it together, and my goal was to keep it under $100, which is why we have like a couple Bloodstained Mires, Temple of Silence. You could cut these cards and make it even more budget if that's your goal, like play a couple more Bloodfell Caves, some other Gain lands, some more basics, more Evolving Wilds. So my goal wasn't to make this as cheap as possible. It was to make it as good as possible while still being under $100. Anyway, this is a synergy-based deck. And I should say the old Aristocrats deck was too. If you just see it on paper, see the deck list, you're kind of like, what's the big deal? This doesn't look that great. But when you see how everything works together, you see where the power comes from. So this is a synergy deck, which means we kind of got to jump around in talking about the list. I can't just read it from top to bottom and have it make sense. So we got to start with the 2 or 3 big pieces. Piece number 1, Butcher of the Horde. 1 red, white, black for a 5/4 flyer. And you can sacrifice another creature to give it your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Haste until end of turn. So this is one of our Aristocrats. Basically Falkenrath Aristocrat, more or less. 4 mana, powerful flyer, closes out games quickly, and allows us to sacrifice a creature for value, and it doesn't cost anything mana-wise to activate the sacrifice ability. The second big piece is Outpost Siege. People play this card, so you're probably familiar with it. So it's a 3 and a red enchantment, and you get to make a choice when it enters the battlefield. You can choose cons, which is what people almost always choose, and it is basically Chandra Pyromancer's 0 ability. You exile a card at the beginning of your upkeep, and until end of turn you can play that card. So it's basically the red version of Phyrexian Arena. In our deck, we still use that option, but we also use the Dragons option, which says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So, when we sacrifice something with Butcher of the Horde, and we have an Outpost Siege that is on Dragons, we are not only giving Butcher of the Horde a benefit, but we are also dealing a damage. This is sort of like Blood Artist in the old Aristocrats deck. The other semi-important piece is Timur the Murder King. This is another sacrifice outlet. It's a 2/2 for black and a red for a legendary zombie warrior. You can pay 1 and a red, and you can sacrifice another target creature to have Timur deal 2 damage to a player. Or, maybe more importantly, you can pay 1 and a black while Timur is in your graveyard and sacrifice a creature, and you can return Timur to your hand. So this is a sack outlet. It's a little expensive since you have to pay 2 mana whenever you activate it, but it's a sack outlet that works from your graveyard, which is really powerful and makes it extremely hard to deal with. It's really hard to stop Timur from coming back if that's what you want to do. So we are trying to sacrifice things with Butcher and Timur, generate value from the sacrifices with Outpost Siege on Dragons. The rest of the deck is built around this foundation. That's the foundation of the deck. Then we have a bunch of seemingly underpowered cards that are synergistic with this strategy. For example, Bloodsoaked Champion. 1 black, you get a 2/1 that can't block. Whatever, that's fine. The real deal here is that it has Raid, so if you attacked with a creature, you can activate an ability where you pay 1 and a black and return Bloodsoaked Champion from your graveyard to the battlefield. So what this means is, with our Butcher of the Horde and Outpost Siege on the battlefield, basically, as long as we attack with our Butcher or some other creature, every 2 mana we pay, we can deal 1 damage with Outpost Siege. We sack Bloodsoaked Champion, deal 1 damage, pay 2 mana, return it to the battlefield, use Butcher, sack Bloodsoaked Champion, deal 1 damage, pay 2 mana, return it to the battlefield. Sultai Emissary is basically the Doom Traveler of this deck. The old Aristocrats deck played Doom Traveler. It was a 1-1 for 1 white mana. When it died, you got a 1-1 flying token. Sultai Emissary is a 1-1 for 1 and a black mana, but when it dies, you get to manifest the top card of your library, so you get a 2-2 token, basically. Except, we have 25 creatures, so there's a pretty reasonable chance that our 2-2 will actually have more value than just being a 2-2 token. We can flip it into something even more powerful. Humble Defector, this is my favorite card in the deck. I'm so excited about this. Just looking at the card, if it only had 3 words of text, it would be incredibly broken. It's 1 and a red for a 2-1. First words are tap, draw 2 cards. Insane. The problem is, it has more words, which say, after you activate the draw 2 card ability, you have to donate it to your opponent and they gain control of it. Well, the thing is, that is a trigger that goes on the stack. So you tap it, you put a trigger that says draw 2 cards, give it to your opponent. Well, in our deck, we can use Butcher of the Horde, we can use Timur to sacrifice Humble Defector in response to the trigger. We still get to draw 2 cards, but our opponent doesn't get to gain control of the creature. So it becomes basically a divination for 1 and a red, which is extremely powerful. And this isn't even to mention the fact that it's generating value for Butcher, dealing a damage for Outpost Siege, and all those other synergies. Flamewake Phoenix, another really synergistic card in this deck. 2-2 flying haste, attacks every turn if able for 1 and 2 red. And then it has Ferocious, where at the beginning of combat, if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, you can pay 1 red mana and return Flamewake from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the way this works is, if you have a Butcher of the Horde and a Flamewake Phoenix, which happen to be on curve, 3-drop, 4-drop, you can sacrifice the Flamewake Phoenix to the Butcher of the Horde on your first main phase. You go to combat, you get a trigger ability that asks you, do you want to pay 1 mana to return Flamewake to your graveyard? And you say, yes please, pay 1 mana, and you get your Flamewake back, get to attack for 7 damage in the air, and do it again the next turn. Jeering Instigator, I know, Jeering Instigator, don't laugh, or jeer. The old deck played Zealous Conscripts, which was a 5 mana for a 3-3 with haste that basically threatened any permanent when it entered the battlefield, so you gain control of it till end of turn. Jeering Instigator is our standard legal version. It's 2 mana for a 2-1, but it has Morph, so you can play it face down for 3 mana as a 2-2, and then you can flip it up. If you flip it up on your turn, you get to gain control of target creature until end of turn. You untap it, it gains haste, blah, blah, blah. The synergy here is we can flip up Jeering Instigator, take our opponent's Siege Rhino or Dragon Lord, get in for damage with it, and then sacrifice it to a Butcher of the Horde or to a Timur, so it kind of becomes a removal spell. This does come up. I had a game where my opponent played a Dragon Lord Slumgar, stole my Butcher of the Horde. I was feeling pretty bad until I drew a Jeering Instigator, was able to play it face down, flip it up, take the Dragon Lord Slumgar, deal damage with the Dragon Lord Slumgar, and then have the ability to sacrifice it to my Butcher of the Horde and get rid of the problem permanently. The other thing I love about Jeering Instigator is no one expects it. If you see a morph, even in a red-black-white deck, you don't think, I bet my opponent is crazy enough to play Jeering Instigator. You think, oh, maybe that's an Ash Cloud Phoenix, or maybe my opponent is splashing a Den Protector and I haven't seen the green mana yet. But you don't think, I bet that is a Jeering Instigator. Finally, we have the last creature, Alicia, who smiles at death. I had one slot in this deck that I just couldn't figure out. I had a Corpse Weft there for a while. Didn't really like it. It was too slow. Decided I'd try out Alicia, which is where I'm at currently. Unfortunately, it just isn't very good. I've never really been able to generate much value from it, so I think it's leaving the deck maybe for another removal spell. But anyway, it's there for now. And it seems like it could be good. We have a lot of things, like we sack a Humble Defector to a Butcher, get to attack with Alicia, pay 2 mana, get back Humble Defector. Like, it seems like it could be powerful, but it just hasn't worked out that way in practice, unfortunately. Mardu Charm is like a do-everything card in this deck. First off, you can choose for red, white, black, so 3 mana, you can choose to deal 4 damage to a creature, which conveniently kills Courser of Krufix, kills Death Mist Raptor, Den Protector, quite a few things, Dragonlord Ojutai. So it's a removal spell, a Flame Slash basically. Then you can choose to put 2 1/1 white warrior tokens onto the battlefield, and they gain first strike until end of turn. That gives us some more creatures that we can sacrifice to our butchers and to our Temuret. It also can sometimes ambush an attacker, and it's a way to play creatures at the end of your opponent's turn, and then you can use those creatures to attack and get back Bloodsoaked Champions from the graveyard. So there's a lot of synergy there. Finally, it's a duress. That's the last option. It's basically a duress, except it's an instant speed duress. So if you're worried about a Wrath or an Ugin or something, you can play Mardu Charm on your opponent's draw step and take whatever problematic card it is before they get a chance to play it. Problematic non-creature card. You can't take creatures with it. So that card's been an all-star. I might up the count to 4 when I get rid of the Alicia. Haven't decided yet. Murderous Cut. We needed a hard removal spell. Decided to go with Murderous Cut. We have a couple fetch lands as well as creatures like Sultai Emissary, Humble Defector that get sacrificed. So we do get to cast it cheaply more often than not. And then finally Sauron. Sauron's another way to generate tokens. And it's also a way to get back in games. Like, there's some games where we don't start off too fast. We're getting beaten down by a Death Mist Raptor or something. And then we play Sauron, and we have a bunch of little dorks on the battlefield, and we just gain back 10 life, and we take over the game with our synergy from there. So this has been a really good addition to the deck. As far as lands, 4 mountains, 4 nomad outposts, 4 Temple of Silence, 4 swamps, 2 Bloodfell Caves, 2 Bloodstained Mire, 2 Temple of Triumph, 1 Evolving Wilds, and 1 Plains. All I'll say about that is, if you're looking to cut money, you can get rid of Scrylands, Bloodstained Mire if you really have to. If you're looking to add money, you can play more fetch lands and more Scrylands. So, yeah. But this was, I think, the best configuration I could come up with while staying under budget. Then the sideboard. Started off without a sideboard in the first match or two, because I was trying to figure out what we really wanted. Then put the sideboard together for the rest of the matches. Anyway, started with 4 duress. We would play Thoughtseize if we could, in all honesty, but Thoughtseize would definitely push us over budget. So this is the best budget substitute we have in Standard. Ashcloud Phoenix. I'm not sure about this slot. My idea was that Ashcloud Phoenix would be a way to grind out slower decks, because you can sacrifice it, it comes back on the battlefield, deals 2 damage when you do it. The problem is it's super slow. Like, unmorphing it costs 6 mana, so you're spending a lot of mana to go through this progression. Could make better use of these slots, perhaps. I'm not 100% sure. Ultimate price, more removal, more early interaction. Magma Spray, same way. You can also play Wild Slash in the same slot. There's some slight upside, I guess, to Magma Spray, in that it deals with things like Bloodsoaked Champion, or can combine with other damage to get rid of a Death Mist Raptor. Like if they block a 1/1 or a 2/1, then you can play Magma Spray post-combat and exile it instead of killing it. Crackling Doom, really good removal spell. I might try to find a way to put these into the main deck. It's a good way to deal with big problematic creatures that the rest of our deck doesn't handle too well. And finally, another copy of Sauron. That's the deck. Had a lot of success with it this week, actually. I've been pretty impressed. I wanted to mention really quickly, another reason I'm excited for this deck is it gets a couple of really sweet things from Magic Origins. For one thing, it gets the new Liliana, which, if you notice, the new Liliana starts off as a 2/3 creature. To flip it over, you need another creature to die. Well, this deck is built around making our creatures die. So with Butcher and with Temuret, it should be pretty easy to play Liliana on turn 3, play a Butcher on turn 4, flip Liliana into a Planeswalker, and just go to town. Also, another possibility is Priest of the Bloodright, which for 5 mana, you get a 2/2, which comes along with a 5/5 Flying Demon, The problem is a 2/2 has a drawback where you lose 2 life at the beginning of your upkeep. Well, again, we're sacrificing creatures. With that, we get a 2/2 that we can sacrifice and get rid of the drawback, and leaves behind a 5/5 body, which is really where you want to be in a format which will soon have Languish and Stoke the Flames and a bunch of removal that deals 4 damage. Anyway, so I think this deck is sweet. I definitely recommend trying it out. I don't know, I just had a ton of fun with it. Like I said, I know it doesn't look like that much on paper, but once you start to play with it and feel all these little micro synergies that work together to make an actual good playable deck, I think you'll have a fun time with it. Yeah, well, let's get on to the videos, and I hope you guys enjoy watching them as much as I enjoyed making them.